Okay, so thank you to the Sawfish Conservation Society for inviting me to talk about my sawfish research today. So the research I'll cover is a project I've been working on with William White in Papua New Guinea, as well as a host of other people, including many in-country partners. So first things first, Papua New Guinea is located in the southeast of Asia. The nation is composed of several volcanic islands stretching out into the Pacific, while the western half of the main island is shared with Indonesia. And biologically, Papua New Guinea is well known for its birds of paradise on land, while underwater, northern PNG and its archipelagos form part of the Coral Triangle, supporting some of the highest levels of coral and fish biodiversity in the world. So today I'll be talking about Papua New Guinea in the context of its conservation potential for sawfish in the Indo-Pacific region. So much of this tropical region is densely populated by humans, and this results in heavy reliance on fisheries resources, which are both commercial and small scale in nature, and also degradation and modification of environments. And these human pressures are most concentrated in easily accessible coastal and riverine habitat, and so it's species that live in these environments that are most affected. And this is precisely the issue for our 4 Indo-Pacific sawfish species. All species seem to rely on lower riverine and inshore habitat throughout their lives, while their large-toothed sawfish additionally uses freshwater environments, often far up rivers as juveniles. And generally speaking, sawfish grow slowly and their rostrum will soar, meaning they're easily entangled in net-based fishing activities. So their habitat preferences, slow growth, and susceptibility to fishing nets are the reasons for their elevated conservation concern. And historically, all 4 sawfish species were distributed throughout tropical coasts and rivers of the Indo-Pacific. Though today, the only reliably occurring populations that are not facing immediate extinction threat seem to be in Northern Australia. And presently, there is a need to identify regions outside of Australia with conservation potential, as rebuilding of populations cannot rely on Australia alone. So that's essentially where Papua New Guinea comes in. Papua New Guinea is characterised by low human population density and little commercialised activities compared to the greater Indo-Pacific region. And there is also an abundance of ideal sawfish habitat, particularly along the country's southern coastline, where human populations are highly dispersed and live by very traditional means. So in 2014, Will and John visited Daru in the Western Province. And in just 1 week, all 4 Indo-Pacific species of sawfish were observed through either shark fin traders or rostra in villages. And this was our first indication that sawfish were potentially abundant in southern PNG. And given that many areas with suitable habitat have far less fishing activity, it quickly became apparent that PNG is possibly a stronghold for sawfish in the Indo-Pacific region. Although it was unclear how much potential there was. Historically, sawfish have always been known to occur in PNG, but to what extent and how common they may have been had never really been assessed. So encouraged by his recent observations, Will White trawled through all known records of sawfish in PNG, including museum specimens dating back to the 1800s. And the product of this extensive review were all the locations where sawfish had historically been reported across Papua New Guinea. So the question was, are they still in these areas? And if so, what is the state of their populations? Although this task is easier said than done, as the areas that needed to be targeted have no roads, no electricity, no sewage, no drinking water, and diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, and polio are still present. So we were largely able to mitigate a lot of these challenges through collaborating with local groups, including the Piku Biodiversity Network, who specialised in riverine turtle research, and also provincial fisheries officers. So my PhD basically consisted of going into regions of Papua New Guinea that often hadn't been surveyed in many decades, if at all, to try and find sawfish and document the local fisheries and any cultural uses and values of sawfish to local people. So these are the rivers and coasts that are targeted, with the focus being on the Gulf of Papua, as little historic data existed for this region, and it looks like the most suitable sawfish habitat. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on how the surveys were carried out, so that I have time to cover what we actually found. But basically, there were three main methods used in our search for sawfish. So firstly, we inspected local fish markets if they existed, but primarily we visited villages directly to talk with local fishers, observe their fishing activity, and look at any dried shark fin or rostra they had. Secondly, we interviewed fishermen throughout villages to try and document their local knowledge of sawfish and also their cultural uses and values of sawfish. We also inquired about sizes caught and if fishers had noticed any population changes during their lifetimes. Finally, we had some keen fishers record their shark and ray catch so that we could see what species were present and frequency of sawfish interactions. And I should point out here that we were very careful not to create a team of sawfish mercenaries. Rather, fishers collected data during routine fishing operations, unaware of our specific interest in sawfishes. And fishers throughout PNG retain any catch for sale or consumption anyway, as fishing is often their primary available livelihood. So we're additionally able to collect some samples in some regions. Okay, so on to what we found, and I'll start with northern PNG, which is map A here on the top left. So we had two species turn up in surveys, the narrow sawfish and the large-toothed sawfish. So on the top map is a distribution of the narrow sawfish. And these were found at the mouth of the Sepik and Ramu rivers, and a range of size classes were observed. Narrow sawfish were commonly caught at the mouth of the Sepik River, and we additionally observed 9 individuals caught in just 5 days at the mouth of the Sepik River. We also had a fisherman record 2 more individuals, including a large 3-metre specimen. Now the bottom map was the observations of large-toothed sawfish. We found large sizes were being caught around the mouth of the Sepik River, while juveniles were being caught upstream. Generally, large-toothed sawfish were not commonly caught, with most fishers reporting just a couple per year. Although we did find a smoked juvenile that had been caught just 2 days before our arrival at Chambry Lake. So onto the south coast now, which is map B here. And throughout this region, we found all 4 Indo-Pacific sawfish. So I'll run through the distributions for each one separately. So firstly, the narrow sawfish. These were found widely throughout the southern regions surveyed. We generally encountered large rostrum sizes only, which may be due to fishers having a preference for retaining larger sizes rather than small ones. We did, however, note very small sizes of just 55 and 64 centimetres total length, which may indicate a smaller birth size range than currently recognised. And an interesting thing about these narrow sawfish rostra was that in some regions, men in a few villages actually used them to fight with during community disputes. So as you can see, this one here has had a handle of sorts cut into its base. So the next species is the dwarf sawfish. So we only encountered 9 individuals of this species, although they were all immature size classes, indicating that breeding populations do occur in PNG. And this was quite an important find for this species, as these represented the first whole specimens reported outside of Australia since 1973. So this is really good data to inform global conservation status for the dwarf sawfish. And moving on to the large-toothed sawfish, these were quite commonly encountered. We found juveniles in all freshwater parts of rivers we were able to survey, and large individuals were noted around the river mouths and adjacent coastlines. This very large rostrum on the right was caught 2 months before our arrival and has an estimated size of about 5.6 metres, making it one of the largest specimens of this species observed from recent catches anywhere in the world. So all in all, this project has confirmed that large-toothed sawfish still occur throughout southern PNG and its many river systems. And lastly is the green sawfish. So we only encountered one specimen via an old saw at a village near the top of the Torres Strait, estimated to be about 3 meters in length. So green sawfish possibly prefer inshore environments away from high-flow turbid rivers, and it is possible that they occur elsewhere in PNG in areas not covered in these surveys. There is also a chance, however, that green sawfish no longer occur in PNG, and that this individual may have moved up to PNG from Australia. So it will be interesting to see if more green sawfish turn up in our future work. So the last piece of data I'm going to share is from some interviews we conducted with local fishers at each of these locations in southern Papua New Guinea. These interviews focused on obtaining information about local knowledge of sawfish to go along with our fishery surveys. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here as I'm running out of time, although a few interesting bits were as follows. So quite a few fishers reported that sawfish are caught at least on a monthly basis, while many fishers in freshwater environments reported weekly capture of what are likely juvenile large-toothed sawfish. And on one occasion in the Turama River, we actually visited a village on our way upstream, and on our return 8 days later, they caught 2 juvenile large-toothed sawfish in that time, which adds validation to these reports, and the locals weren't just telling us what they thought we wanted to hear. So across regions, sawfish are generally retained when caught. And this is because they represent a large protein source, particularly in freshwater communities, while in coastal regions, the sale of shark fin and meat can be important to local economies. Fishers who said they don't always retain sawfish usually stated that it was because they prefer to eat other types of fish, or that they have no access to markets to sell excess catch. A worrisome trend, however, was that fishers usually kill or cut the saw from animals tangled in nets, regardless of any intended use or not. So when sawfish are retained by fishers, it's mostly for consumption and sale. Quite a few villages will additionally keep rostrum for decoration on their houses, although this is a secondary use of animals retained for consumption and sale. A few communities have cultural uses of sawfish, which usually related to medicinal properties, although this was in reference to shark in general, rather than directly involving sawfish. And the last graph I'm going to share was responses of fishers to whether they have noticed changes in sawfish numbers within their lifetimes. So 2/3 of interviewees reported either declines in catch frequency or size classes caught. And this varied across regions, with Turama River fishers providing the most optimistic results. All in all, from this work, it is clear that unrestricted use of gill nets are the primary threat to sawfish in Papua New Guinea. However, the cultural implications of fisher livelihoods may make regulation of gill nets a highly complex task. So developing conservation initiatives for sawfish in Papua New Guinea is extremely challenging, and as sawfish are largely viewed as a traditional food source and not for biodiversity value as perceived by global conservationists. So to finish up, a few of the conservation initiatives we're developing are based around this simple message. We're developing educational materials directed to children's schools in remote communities who often lack education resources. We are also looking to develop culturally appropriate safe release guides to encourage fishers to untangle rather than kill or cut saws to remove animals from nets. And we are also continuing to develop community relationships through the Piku Biodiversity Network in order to promote community engagement and participation. And the Conservation and Environmental Protection Authority in PNG have recognised and are looking to support our work, which is very positive. So while there is much to do, hopefully we can rewrite the sawfish story and safeguard Papua New Guinea as a global stronghold into the future. So thank you again to Save Our Seas Foundation for funding this work, and to the many people who have assisted in some way, shape or form in this project and its very challenging fieldwork. And thank you again to the Sawfish Conservation Society for inviting me today. It's a great initiative and our sawfish certainly need all the help they can get. So finally, if anyone has any questions or would like to contact me, please use the channels here or check out our blogs on the Save Our Seas website for more information. So thank you again.